Hello, I am Dr. Lynn Gerner, chiropractor, breastfeeding specialist, lactation educator. I am this close to my IBCLC, which is the International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, um, instructor with the ICPA, mother, wife, and absolute anatomy geek. Welcome to Geek Out with Dr. Lynn. We are going to talk about all sorts of fun facts about breastfeeding. And our first episode here, as you can see, is how exactly does your baby breastfeed? Okay, now this is the first video in a long series that I'm going to make. And so we're just going to talk about the foundation right now. There's basically four things that your baby has to be able to do and four pieces of anatomy that have to work properly for your baby to do it. So in order to breastfeed, the first thing that we all talk about is the latch. Your baby has to be able to open its mouth nice and wide around the areola, not just the nipple. You can see that you can see very little of the areola. And why is that? That's because the milk lives in the deeper breast tissue in the milk ducts. And if the baby's just right around the nipple itself, that's not going to be very effective. In fact, it's going to hurt a lot. So he has to be able to open his mouth nice and wide. What's responsible for that? The jaw. We're talking about the jaw being able to open nice and wide and evenly. Then when that happens, as you can see, we've got the nipple, we've got some of that breast tissue in the mouth. The next thing that he has to be able to do is to use the tongue to press that breast tissue as tight as possible up against the roof of the mouth. Now, we all hear about the tongue all the time. Anybody ever heard of what's called a tongue tie? Yeah, probably. We're going to talk about that a lot in future videos. But for today's conversation, the baby has to have a tongue that is strong enough and can move normally enough to press that breast tissue up against the palate, which is the roof of the mouth. Now, sometimes that palate is too high. So if that's the case, and especially if that weak is either, or the tongue is either too weak or it's what we call tethered and not doesn't move as well as it should, it's going to be extra hard for that baby to get that breast tissue up against the roof of the mouth. Why is that necessary? Well, the actual milk transfer does not happen by the baby just sucking on the nipple. In fact, if that's what's happening, there's likely going to be pain, damage, maybe cracking involved on the mom part of the parent's nipple. What happens is that there's supposed to be a seal and a pressure exchange. So if that tongue isn't working properly, if the palate is too high, that can't happen. And then the last one is that the baby has to be able to turn its neck evenly from side to side. Have you ever heard about a baby not being able to breastfeed on one side versus the other, or struggling to breastfeed on the right versus the left, or vice versa? It's just because they're not able to turn their neck comfortably from side to side. Now, let's look at something really quick here. This picture right here is just like this guy. It's a big head, but it's color-coded because it's easier to see. The take-home message here is that all of the cranial bones are connected. This picture here is actually, if we were to take this off, I have a brain in mine, and turn it upside down, that's what it looks like in the base of the cranium. The other take-home message on this slide is, if we're looking at this little baby head, that's what it looks like more, when the baby's little. Where those bones are connected, those are called sutures. And guess what? In a baby, those sutures are not solid. You and I, the adults watching this video, our cranial bones don't move very much. They still move a little bit, but not very much, because the connections, these sutures, are solid now. There's not as much wiggle room. But a baby's head or cranial bones can move a lot, can shift places. And when they do, it takes everything else with it, including everything that's connected on the inside. So here's a invitation. I have a video that is free that you can find on that QR code if you're interested in what I had to say today. Breastfeeding Made Simpler is about 30 minutes to go into much more detail. You can find out more about my classes on that website called thegoodlifelearning.com. And if you're in the Davis or Sacramento area, I'm in clinical practice as well. Thank you so much for joining me.